Good morning and happy Friday. We made it, people. It has been a long week. And I am so excited to be here with our third interview, all school board candidates so far. Talking to Mitch Reed, who's running for District 3. That's kind of the north and west part of Okaloosa County. But everybody gets to vote in that race. So pay attention because school board races are August the 18th. We have a couple months left for y'all to make a decision. So, Mitch, if you would just kind of tell us about yourself. Who is Mitch Reed?
Yeah, sure. I came to Florida, Northwest Florida in 1992, was in Crestview, went to Northwood Elementary and then Richburg, and then 97 came to Baker School, graduated in 2003, went to OW, as it was then, and then went to Johnson University in Tennessee and ended up going to the Army, but not before I did a short stint as a substitute teacher for about a year and was an FCAT mentor. And then Yep, military thing, and then did some contract work after I got medically retired from the Army. I was a missile defense officer, and then some GS work at Hurlburt, and then I went full-on entrepreneur, and now I'm an executive in tech.
So I saw. Well, I want to go through two things. What's the best thing about being a missile defense officer? That seems like a pretty niche kind of a group of guys. And then, yeah, I guess start with that.
Yeah, sure. Listen, so I learned a lot about the importance of communication um, and people in technological environments, especially some of which it's popular right now. So you hear a lot about Iron Dome, Golden Dome, Patriot. I've been around a lot of those systems and folks, and really important stuff. And geopolitically, the goal there is to protect lives and to convince folks that, look, we shouldn't be doing this to begin with. So some really great geopolitical missions, and very thankful for our men and women out there serving in that capacity.
Very good. And then I also noticed that you got a counseling degree from UTEP. As a member of the school board, how would you leverage that?
Yeah, sure. And to clarify, my counseling degree is from Johnson University, and I have a leadership degree from UTEP.
My bad.
And and the focus of both really was focusing on people. All my careers have been focused around people and service to others, and the ability to listen and to kind of just sit back and hear people out. And I think that's probably going to be the most important skill that I have, is being able to listen, having led many teams, and using those foundational teachings and learnings that I got in those programs.
Very good. So the first thing that really drew my attention, because I thought this was something that was really important to my family, was the amount of screen time that is currently really in our society, but specifically in our public schools. I remember very vividly one of the teachers or administrators at Plu Elementary, where my daughter went to school, talking about how they were an Apple certified school, and how that was amazing. And I'm looking at all the literature on your website, and you're like, I don't know, it's a lot of screens.
I love it. So, and my kids get on to me because as a tech executive, specifically in AI and quantum, you would assume that I have a lot of tech in the house, which we have some capabilities from me and my spouse. But the kids, our children, very little, and I have some reasons for that. And I recently posted and talked about this. I truly believe in making sure we're making data-informed decisions. And our children deserve to have skills. And to get them there, I believe that we have to focus on the foundations first. And that doesn't start with technology or screens. It starts with them and the teachers. And the foundation of our schools, and what makes them great, is the foundational things like reading, writing, and arithmetic, and critical thinking. And so I'm a big proponent of the crawl, walk, run model. And it is a paradigm shift. Instead of following the ed tech trends, as I call them right now, the data shows that children need foundations first. They need to understand how to read. They need to understand how to comprehend what they're reading, and the very basic fundamentals. And we can't do that by pushing tech too early. And so I'm a proponent that our elementary schools should have much less screen time, if any at all, maybe just for accommodations and testing, things like that. So that is a big shift where I want to take us to lead things. Middle school is kind of your introduction to concepts, digital citizenship, right? You're typing, things like that. And you can start some of that maybe fifth grade. And then high school is where you really got to get folks ready for the workforce, which is what we're supposed to be preparing these children so that they can go and thrive in society and have the skills that they need to thrive.
And so, what would you say to people that would argue, well, if we don't give them the tech now, they're going to be behind when everybody else knows how to computer program or AI real good, what would you say to those people?
Sure. And listen, high school is the absolute prime time to do that. Truly, high school is about honing in and figuring out what skills you're going to get and getting them ready for the workforce. But if you don't have a foundation to build on, if you don't understand how to read or write or think critically, you're not going to be able to navigate anything, let alone technology. And so, as the future workforce that I'm seeing, I'm seeing a trend across the world where we have to focus on a skilled workforce.
So changing gears just a little bit, you would be serving on the school board if you were to win election. How do you view your role as a school board member vis-a-vis the superintendent? What does that relationship need to look like?
Sure. First of all, I think it's important that it remains very professional. I don't think that either the board or the superintendent should be endorsing one another or contributing to one another's campaigns or things like that, because it's such an important professional relationship. It mirrors that of the corporate world, which is the board serves as the governing body of the entire district, and the superintendent's the CEO. And they have to work in tandem together. And the board governs with policy and budgeting and ensuring that there's a vision there, a long-term plan, the priorities, the mission, and the superintendent's the execution aspect of that. So they have to work in tandem in partnership.
All right. And so just kind of going into it, you put a post up a little bit ago, or I guess a couple days ago, talking about accountability and truth and transparency. What do you see as a deficit that's taken place in the county school district right now? How would you differentiate yourself from what's happening currently?
Gosh, honestly, there's quite a few things here, but I'll try and package a couple while we're on here. First of all, everything's got to be done in the sunshine. And with that, because there's so many limitations with sunshine, which is great, those workshops, gosh, they're going to be full with me because I have a whole bunch of stuff I'd like to work on, and honestly, probably be 7 to 8 hour work days, to be honest with you. Things like long-term strategic infrastructure planning, truly making sure that we avoid and prevent what happened with the recent decision to close Longwood and Mary Esther, which was, in the last 2 years, we allocated about $15 million and we spent $8.5 million improving them. But we hadn't earmarked it in such a way that we could have prevented how much we invested, because some of them were safety related and required, but a lot of it wasn't. And now we're bulldozing those schools and we're wasting millions of dollars of taxpayer money. So that type of lack of planning and accountability there is not very good. Secondly, for transparency, we got to make sure everything's out in the open. Some of the things that have recently been introduced, a lot of those things could have been done much better had they been transparently done. And the last thing I'll say about that is, when we want basic answers, whether it's more line item or fiduciary information or non-sensitive information, just so we understand what's going on with our schools, we shouldn't have to submit a pile of FOIAs just to understand what's going on with our public schools.
So
So I think, go
so
ahead.
what are some of the specifics about this transparency? Because you said kind of some generalities, but I think people would want to know what specifically needs to change in order for there to be more transparency. What cases would you cite to say that there isn't right now?
Sure, I'll give you two. First is just some of the financial transparency of the contracts, the terms. Having to submit FOIAs to get copies of those. I think there's a lot of that information that should be available on a public dashboard, which we have a website, but the website's very atrocious. It's hard to navigate. It's hard to find things when you want to find stuff. The half-cent dashboard is okay. But everything that the school does should operate that way and be a lot easier to find. Even publish some things on Facebook, kind of walk people through, hey, here, if you want to look at the financial reports for your school, here's where they live, right? And here's what they look like. Here's some things you might want to know. And what does taxpayer return on our investment look like? And kind of show the citizens and kind of guide them instead of just hiding off in the corner for no one to maybe even ever find it. Secondly, as far as the conduct of people, recently, you've seen the news about the superintendent and improprieties and things like that. Some really serious allegations, right? Those things should have been talked about publicly and done in the sunshine, and they weren't in the way that they should have been. And so those types of things are so important to ensure that we keep the faith and confidence of the public and the staff internally. Those things can be very damaging, even in the military. If there's even a perception of some of those things, they have to be dealt with and handled immediately and very sternly.
Got it. And so you talk about measurable outcomes. I think this is a really interesting thought because um, I'm a big SMART goals guy. So, what would some of the SMART goals, the specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time sensitive goals, would you want to put in the school district as a policymaker? What would you like to see if you had two other votes on the board with you?
Yeah, let's clarify that a little bit.
So, if you have the majority on the board, let's say that there's two other people that agree with you no matter what, right? What policy changes would you like to see or what policies would you want to put in place to achieve goals that you have? So, like, what goals do you have, and how
Okay.
would you achieve them?
Got it. Sure. Yeah. So there's a few things. One of the first things I would want to do is a shift from the current way we do business, which is very district heavy, as far as how we manage and lead our schools and our people and our operations. And what I mean by that, there's a site-based management, or SBM, way of operating, which empowers the principals to have more decision-making authority. And with that comes some major policy overhauls and revisions, additions. It's got to be done very deliberately and carefully to ensure that the smaller schools don't fall through the cracks. Because historically, having learned from how public schools operate in the past, we found some lessons learned that could be improved on. But that model allows local governance. It allows our principals to be empowered with more decision-making authority. It gives our teachers more capabilities, and it allows them to focus on the needs of their children and their communities and truly be that staple point of their community. Because right now, we have a tendency to micromanage and to take everything up to the district and take that away from our principals. And I don't think that's a very agile way to do governance. And it's hard to get a good return on taxpayer investments when you're micromanaging that much.
So, would you say, like, for example, leaving stuff like curriculum or HR decisions, stuff like that, would that move devolve down to the principals, or how would that work?
Sure, absolutely. And there needs to be a lot of pieces of that are handled at the principal level, right? They can field it, they can basically filter and have it all but signed for final approval at the district, where we
Okay.
streamline that process. So at that point, it's simply making sure that that director of whatever field and operational purview it falls under is just under quick review for legal compliance, making sure that our district's running well.
So when we talk a lot about administration, there's a lot of stuff in the ether about a heavy administration. What would the change look like? I mean, how many jobs are we talking about potentially altering or cutting or doing away with in some form or fashion under a change like this?
You're alluding to a Manpower study. So
Indeed.
listen, that's important. We should do it. We should always be doing that. And when we're under budget constraints, so this model runs lean. Back in the day here in Okaloosa County, some teachers who've been around for a hot minute remember when we used to have to throttle back the power and turn up the AC number to about 80 or a little higher maybe at night. But it's even 20 plus years ago, it saved us millions of dollars.
Okay.
It was a big savings. The same is true of Manpower. We would have to do a honest assessment, especially with automations. We talk about AI and bad uses of it, but one of the good uses is automation of administrative tasks. There's a lot of things that we could very smartly, securely, which we can talk about that separately, securely leverage these capabilities to cut back on some of our administrative staff that probably isn't necessary.
Okay. And I think one of the things that really interests me, just knowing several teachers that have been in my life, we talk a lot about teacher benefits, but in my mind, that also means you have to do one of two things, right? You have to cut significantly, or you have to increase taxes, property taxes, grants, something, right? How would you improve those teacher benefits, and what is it going to cost us in order to retain talented teachers?
Let's go. And this is going to be something I'm very focused on, making sure that we're focused on not just our teachers, but getting the most out of our tax dollars. First of all, I am not pro tax increase at all, period, because we can't even get our budget right as it is. And until we get right as a school district, we shouldn't even be, we shouldn't even be thinking about penalizing the taxpayer just because we can't better manage our dollars. When we're bulldozing tax money and we have a higher overhead than we need on the administrative side, when we haven't maximized our utilities and things like that, we're not leveraging all the tools capabilities that are at our disposal, many of which are at free or no cost. We can't even entertain those conversations. So, I'm at this point, I'm committed to a rollback.
So you would cut potentially administrative staff?
Absolutely. If we do the manpower study and there's a way that we can, then we should.
And so, there are naturally, right, fewer administrators than there are line teachers. So where does the rest of the money for like a salary bump come from? So, for example, Walton County, I think, pays an extra $6,000 a year to an equivalent teacher straight out of school, and then the numbers kind of get a little bit closer as you go.
Yeah, and we don't have enough time to talk about the complexities of all the different pots of money within a school district because it's government money, so it's complicated, and there's different pots that can only be allocated for certain things. And we're talking about salary increases. Every board member, and I'm going to talk about myself here, I will be advocating in Tallahassee very constructively and working with our legislators to push as hard, if not harder, than any school board member in the state to push for salary increases for our teachers. Because if we're not investing in our teachers, the people who are in the classroom helping lead and teach and empower our children, I was inspired by teachers right here in Okaloosa County. That's why I'm here today, thanks to them. If we're not investing in them, it's not a good look for us. And right now we're sitting at the bottom of the United States in teacher salaries, and we can do better. And that's a legislative fight. And I'm going to be here to support our legislators in that fight.
So that helps raise pay overall, but how does Okaloosa County compete with Walton County, who's paying more, or with private schools or charter schools? How do we make up that gap in teacher pay?
At this point, I couldn't answer that for sure, but it's going to start with that agile governance model that I talked about. And we're going to have to be honest about it and transparent about it, right? And at the end of the day, once we've made all those cuts, once we've leaned and meaned out our system and we're operating where we should be, we're going to know what kind of budget we have. There's other things that go into this, like marketing, getting our enrollment back up, making Okaloosa County a more competitive option. Because I'm also a proponent of school choice, and I love a good competition, and I want our public schools to be a fantastic competitive option for parents that they're confident in. And if we market that, we compete that way, we can get some of those dollars back. But if we're not having that fight and that conversation, this conversation gets really interesting. And so that's where I stand with that. Though I think there is a lot of money there to be had. There's a way that we can do it, but we've got to be deliberate in how we approach it.
And so, just on the topic of school vouchers, right? You've said that you're pro school choice. There's a couple posts on your social media talking about how you have different kids that are going to be in different places. So you're pro school choice. My question for you though is don't we lose economies of scale by having more choices, right? Like if there's one school district and every kid in Okaloosa County goes to it, it's got to be cheaper to operate, right?
Sure. We're not losing out. It's all about the quality of the education. So my children are actually all in public schools here in Okaloosa County. One's at Collegiate High, one's at STEM, but it's controlled open enrollment, which I talk about. School choice is more than private options and charter schools and things like that, which are great options, and parents deserve to have those options. But in my case, it's the controlled open enrollment that has been an absolute blessing because there are certain skill sets in different children, and they've been able to thrive thanks to that ability. And that's been pretty incredible to have that. But we have to govern that well. Otherwise, we could potentially lose it if we don't.
Yeah. Moving on to school buildings, they're incredibly expensive. Ours are the oldest, I think they're the oldest aggregate in the state. There's a study done by the Department of Education at the federal level that says essentially after 60 years, you need to throw away the school because it's just been used so much and so hard that it's just got to be knocked down and recreated. In about 10 years, most of our schools are going to be at that limit. So with the school costing somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to $80 million a piece, how do we prepare for that? Or how do we change in order to be able to afford this massive overhaul that we have over the horizon?
Right. This goes kind of to the workshop conversation. Those workshop days need to be full with smart people, committees, and subject matter experts, and putting together a long-term strategic infrastructure plan focused on this. We're kind of behind the curve a little bit. And these are some things that we need to play catch up on so that we can get right. These things should have already been part of a 25, 30-year plan, maybe even a 50-year plan in some regards, because these are big moves and big undertakings that deserve more than reactionary changes and adjustments. And we've seen some of the consequences of reactionary changes and adjustments lately.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about across the street at Plu, from where I am. I mean, it's built in 1967, so it's coming up on 50 years right now. It's got 10 more years of life, according to the Department of Education, right? And I've not seen a way to, even with the half-cent sales tax, I don't think there's enough revenue generated to replace all of the schools.
Yeah, and you're right. And so here's something that's really important. One is the plan, but even more important is how you approach a problem. I'll tell you a little bit how does Mitch Reed approach
Sure.
a problem. The board, with me, I'm going to make sure and push for priorities. Everyone should understand what the top 5 priorities are. And when we go to vote to make a decision, we bounce it off of those 5 priorities and mission of the district. And then when we say, hey, here are our 5 priorities, when something comes across the table, if it's not in those top 5 priorities, guess what? It goes to the backlog, and we get to it when we get to it. But we need to be very deliberate and calculated with those priorities. And if they're going to be a priority, they need to be measurable. Sometimes we see in governance a priority that comes up, or a project, or something we're working on. And then when you look at, I'll call them measures, how are we measuring our success of those priorities, and how are we achieving a goal, if there is a goal, which there should be? What does it look like? And how do we define that? And how do we measure that? All that needs to be laid out in our strategic plan, and those priorities need to be clearly understood by not just the board and the superintendent, but every administrator and teacher in the district should understand the mission and the priorities of the district.
So you're a part of a 5-member board if you win this election. So you don't get absolute, say without some input. But if Mitch got to pick, what are the 3 goals you're attacking first?
Sure. The first thing is making sure that we're getting lean and mean and focused on agile governance and good governance. The second major goal is making sure, and of course, when I say that, that includes things like safety, our metrics, our curricula. We're just doing overall. The second major thing is making sure that we have the right policies in place to protect our leaders, our teachers, our administrators, our students, and that they make sense. And then the third thing is communications. And that includes things like improving the website, making sure everything's in the sunshine, making sure that we're maximizing our time as a board, as administrators, as principals, how we're using our facilities, our buses, and our support staff. So those are going to be my 3 top priorities getting in.
So you reference agile governance, and maybe I'm just not familiar with it, or I'm just a dummy. But can you kind of explain for me like what agile governance means to you?
Sure, no, I appreciate it. So when you operate with a top-centric approach, it's very slow, and it takes a long time to move the ball down the court, if you will. But when you decentralize and you empower your leaders to truly lead, it allows them to go faster. They don't have to wait as long as they do for approval all the way up to the top of the district. Now, instead, a lot more things are pushed down to not everything, but more things are pushed down to them so that they can make more decisions that make sense and that allow the district less bureaucracy and more focus on the children and the teachers and in the ecosystem, which creates more esprit de corps and community-centric approach to education.
So something like giving a company grade or a field grade officer more latitude.
It's a great parallel. So for those that are military and the chain of command, imagine a battery or company commander with no authority. You take away their command authority, and if they're enlisted, their responsibility. And the more of that you take away, the less effective they are as a command group.
Okay. And then you said policies to protect educators and administrators and students. Protect them from what?
Sure. I'll give you a quick, simple one. So one of the first things I would, propose, and if they're listening, you guys are watching, which I know some of you are going to watch it. I highly recommend and encourage you to do this before I get in there, because I'm going to push for this. We have to protect our children and their data, our teachers and their data, our administrators. Everyone deserves to be protected from cyber threats, from being collected, from their privacy and their personal information. The moment we introduce something, even if we have a firewall and we've got two-factor authentication, if we have devices that are manufactured in a country with nefarious intent, specifically China, if we have Chinese manufactured devices, which we do in Okaloosa County schools, whether it's a mouse, a keyboard, a camera, we've compromised the network from within. And that's very dangerous to our children. And they deserve, and our teachers, everyone deserves to have a safe network to learn in and to do what they need to do to be focused on school and not adversarial threats.
So like making sure that even like the mouses and the keyboards are made in America or Germany or Mexico as opposed to like China or Russia or
Absolutely.
Iran. Okay.
And the U.S. government actually publishes an annual checklist
Okay.
with these items on it. And there are ways, and honestly, very streamlined ways to do this, but we have to codify that in policy.
Okay.
And I've got a plethora of similar things and policies that we can put in place that are no cost, that as we phase out electronics or we start to shift towards more effective governance, we can start getting after it, save taxpayer money. People are going to be safer, and we're going to be operating much more effectively and efficiently.
All right, perfect. Well, Mitch Reed, thank you so much for your time today. Any last words, a Parthian shot, as it were, for everybody here that's watching in internet land?
Sure. Listen, I'm very proud to be here. This is my home community, and could be more excited to be running to serve you as your next school board member. Thanks.